Whether thou art a ghost that hath come from the earth, or a phantom of night that hath no home, or one that lieth dead in the desert, or a ghost unburied, or a demon, or a ghoul, whatever thou be until thou art removed, thou shalt find here no water to drink. Thou shalt not stretch forth thy hand to our own. Into our house enter thou not. Through our fence break through thou not. We are protected, though we may be frightened. Our life you may not steal, though we may be scared to death.
Welcome to another October edition of Scared to Death, Creeps, Peepers, Roberts, Annabelle's brand new people. I'm Dan.
Hey, Dan. I'm Lindsay.
Hello, Lindsay.
Hey, everybody.
I got a fun show for you again today. Hopefully a creepy, scary show for you. But first, very quick merch announcement. We have a collection of creepy teas for the spoopy season. Get some inspiration for your carving skills with our pumpkin head tea. Take a seat and relax at Damien's Place, where you will be the tastiest treat on the menu. And there are blankets and hoodies as well, and it's all at badmagicproductions.com.
And for you Swifties, we've got a In My Spoopy Era t-shirt up in the store as well. It's so sweet and so fun for creeps and peepers of all ages. So we hope that you guys enjoy that. Mm-hmm. And I have a few quick announcements.
Yeah.
In fact, you guys, I have a few questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
Have you picked up your tickets for our annual live Halloween show?
Come on.
Have you submitted your 50-word submission to Haunting Hooks? Are you joining us this Saturday, October 12th at Scarywood in Athol, Idaho? Not sure what the heck I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, guys. All of this will be in the episode description. All the links, all the things you need, because you're probably driving or at work right now, and you're like, Lindsay, shut up. I don't know what you're saying.
So read it right there.
Exactly. Nailed it. And on a slightly more serious note, before we dive into the show, Dan and I want to acknowledge all of our friends, family, people listening who have lived through Hurricane Helene at this point, or have family that is down there. It is a developing story. As we're recording this. So we don't have a lot to say other than we are sending our love and our support. One of our team members, who's a researcher here, Olivia, she's in that area. Our book editor, Drew, he is also in that area.
A lot of fans, getting a lot of emails.
Yeah, we have family in Tampa. So we have been watching, holding our breath. We hope you're all okay. And, we just want you to know we're thinking about you.
Yeah, and now, especially if you're there, let's give you some escapism. How many fan-submitted paranormal encounter stories do you have, Lulu?
Well, Daniel, I have 2 stories. Shocking, I know. My first story is a little bit on the lighter side, but it is a really awesome confirmation from the other side story that I really like. Mm-hmm. And my second story takes us to a place that I had never heard of called Hoffman's Mansion.
Huh.
Now, apparently, if you live in Joplin, Missouri, or in the surrounding area, you may be familiar with this. And I'm going to share one fan's encounter at the Hoffman Mansion.
Very cool. I have my standard 2, a haunted house double feature. So it sounds like we'll have 3 haunted house stories today.
How perfect.
Mm-hmm. My first is heavily detailed. A lot of eyewitness accounts from the 19th century. And I love these kind of stories. If Northern England's Willington Mill, located about halfway between Newcastle and North Shields, is not haunted, well, then a lot of people over the years have been lying. Very cool Victorian England haunted house claim.
Oh, boy. Are you a Victorian tale?
No, it's not going to be one of those. My first story is on the longer side. My second is a bit shorter than normal. I'll share the haunted lore of Staten Island, New York's haunted Kreischer. There we go. No N in there. Kreischer Mansion.
Does Bert Kreischer live there?
I did kind of wonder if there was a connection. Not as many claims, but still supposedly very haunted. So I'll get going once you're socked up and feeling protected from any bad juju.
Well, my socks this week, continuing with my Halloween theme. Look at these guys. Look, I won't let you touch them right now, but they are
very soft.
So soft and cozy. These super yummy gray Halloween socks with neon pumpkins all over them.
They're very cute.
They are very sweet.
Okay, so fair amount of historical but interesting setup for this first story.
All not told in a Victorian voice. Awesome.
True. Today we're headed back to 1834 to meet the Proctors, an upper-class Quaker family who reportedly endured over a dozen years of supernatural torment in a building that would be called the most haunted place in England for quite some time. The Proctors lived on land rumored to once belong to a witch, land long rumored to be home to dark spirits, strange cryptids, and more. They lived in a home that the previous family residing there believed to be haunted by not just ghosts, but by demons. And the property has continued to produce reports of encounters of the paranormal all the way up into the present. Today we'll focus almost entirely on the Proctors' experiences. And they allegedly experienced so much that while I will definitely share a lot, I still won't share even half of their total claims.
Wow.
The intense paranormal phenomena that occurred in the Proctors' home was well documented, occurred over many years, and was experienced firsthand by over 30 witnesses, one of whom described it as one of the most remarkable cases of a haunting in modern times. Before I begin, though, I'm going to cover a little bit of background on both the Proctor family and Willington Mill, where today's story takes place. Willington Mill was located about halfway between Newcastle, I say was, still is, between Newcastle and North Shields in northern England. During the first half of the 19th century, the expansive property consisted of a large steam mill, a parsonage, a few workers' cottages, and the miller's house. It was also, interestingly enough, one of the very first steam mills in all of the UK. Back then, it was owned and operated by two Quaker cousins, George Unthank and Joseph Proctor. They ran the company side by side. George and his family lived on the property initially, and then Joseph Proctor and his family moved into the Willington Mill property when the first family, the Unthanks, could no longer endure their paranormal torment. It seems that George and his family were able to keep their paranormal encounters a secret until years after they moved out. George was very worried about the stain that claims of ghosts and demons would leave on his reputation. In 1842, while investigating the alleged haunting of Willington Mill, scholar and historian William Howitt wrote that the house is not an old house, as will appear. It was built about the year 1800. It has no particularly spectral look about it. Seeing it in passing or within, ignorant of its real character, one should by no means say that it was a place likely to have the reputation of being haunted. Much like their house, the Proctor family also did not look like the type to be haunted by ghosts. This is because the Proctors were a distinguished and wealthy family with a reputation in northern England of being of superior stock and intelligence. And when word got out that Joseph, his wife, and their children were claiming that their home was haunted, it was a big deal and a bit scandalous. You see, back then, belief in the supernatural was considered to be something only the poorer classes indulged in. Ghosts, ghouls, hobgoblins, poltergeists, fairies, spirits, wights, and all other mystical and paranormal entities belonged strictly to the proletariat. To the high-born elites in the early Victorian era, being superstitious and open to the occult was synonymous with being ignorant and uneducated. In other words, claiming to have seen a ghost was a perfectly fine thing for a servant or a factory worker to do, but not for an upper-class, educated man of business like Joseph Proctor, which is exactly why his cousin seemed to keep his own family's horrors a secret. William Howitt described the social attitudes towards the upper class and the spiritual world at the time like this: "We have of late years settled it as an established fact that ghosts and haunted houses were the empty creation of ignorant times. We have comfortably persuaded ourselves that such fancies only hovered in the twilight of superstition, and that in these enlightened days they had vanished forever. How often has it been triumphantly referred to as a proof that all such things were the offspring of ignorance, that nothing of the paranormal kind is heard of now? What shall we say, then, to the following facts? Here we have ghosts and a haunted house still. We have them in the face of our vaunted noonday light, in the midst of a busy and populous neighborhood, in the neighborhood of a large and most intelligent town, and in a family neither ignorant nor in any other respect superstitious. For years have these ghosts and hauntings disturbed the quiet of a highly respectable family, and continue to haunt and disturb, spite of the incredulity of the wise, the investigations of the curious, and the anxious vigilance of the suffering family itself." Their vocabulary was so much more robust than ours.
Was that supposed to be incredulous? Is that
Incredulous. No, it's oh my God.
It's a hard word.
It's a word I thought I had figured out when I wrote it, but
Incredulity?
Incredulity?
Sure.
Incredulity.
You learn something.
It's incredulous, but with an ITY at the end.
You learn something new every day.
And I think that's enough big fancy Victorian words for the setup and
Can
enough.
you bring it back down to the pores level
I know.
for me, please?
And myself as well. Let's just tell this story. Time now for the tale of the haunting of Willington Mill. According to Joseph Proctor's diary, his family's haunting began in November of 1834, and the first person in Joseph's home to experience the ghost and report it was the family's nursemaid. She had been putting the Proctor's youngest child, a little boy of only 2 years old, to sleep in the nursery when she heard it. The dull sound of heavy footsteps treading back and forth in the room directly above her on the third floor. Normally, this wouldn't bother the nursemaid. The house was, after all, constantly filled with the sounds of the large staff of servants going about their work and visitors touring the property and children running around. However, no matter how many people were crammed inside the house of Willington Mill, the room above the nursery on the third floor always remained empty. The door to that room had literally been nailed closed and had been shut off from the rest of the house for years. It seems that George Unthank likely nailed the door to the third-story room closed when he and his family lived in the home prior to the Proctors. When he and his family moved out due to fear of the place being haunted, they likely did not, again, tell George's cousin's family out of embarrassment. But it seems that they very much believed that the third-floor room was infested with some sort of demon or demons. And now with the Proctors residing in the house, every night when the nursemaid laid the baby down to sleep, she would hear the chilling sound of someone angrily pacing slowly, methodically above her head. It petrified her, but she knew how ridiculous she would sound if she tried to tell someone what was happening. So for weeks and weeks, she just endured hearing these sounds and never said anything. But finally, after 2 months of this had passed, the mistress of the house, Mrs. Elizabeth Proctor, confronted the nursemaid. Mrs. Proctor had noticed a change in the young servant's attitude of late and wanted to know what was troubling her. Despite her fear of getting laughed at, the nursemaid confessed everything. She told Mrs. Proctor about the noisy ghost in the room above the nursery and how the grievous sound of its footsteps left her in a constant state of dread and alarm. The diary doesn't reveal whether or not Mrs. Proctor believed her servant, but it does say that the next evening, a kitchen girl was sent to accompany the nursemaid while she put the child to bed. And that kitchen girl later reported that she did not hear any footsteps. This did very little for the nursemaid's credibility, and soon everyone in the house was gossiping about how her paranormal delusions and superstitions were going to drive her mad. But then, something miraculous and horrifying happened. Mrs. Proctor herself heard the same ghost. It had been 6 days since the nursemaid told Mrs. Proctor about the phantom footsteps, and though no evidence had been found to corroborate its existence, she was still terrified of the poltergeist that haunted the room above the nursery. Thinking that perhaps what the young servant had been hearing at night was a rat scurrying about on the third floor, on the afternoon of January 23rd, 1835, Mrs. Proctor ordered one of the maids to reopen the abandoned room above the nursery and sweep it out. That same evening, Elizabeth Proctor was alone in the nursery with her baby when she heard someone walking around the chamber directly above her. According to her husband's diary, Elizabeth automatically assumed that it was the maid, doing the very cleaning she had requested. When the baby finally fell asleep, Elizabeth tiptoed out of the nursery, silently hoping that the sound of the maid's unusually heavy footsteps would not wake him back up. To her surprise, when she got downstairs, Mrs. Proctor found the maid working diligently in the kitchen with a few other members of the staff. Alarmed, the mistress of the house asked the maid if she had just been cleaning out the third-floor chamber. The maid said she had not, that she hadn't had the time to get up there today, but that she would do so first thing in the morning. Elizabeth now ran back upstairs. She then stood in front of the third-floor bedroom, utterly confused, panic washing over her. The door was still nailed shut. From that day onward, the paranormal activity that occurred within the walls of the Willington Mill house increased exponentially. As Joseph wrote in his diary, before many days had elapsed, every member of the family had witnessed precisely what the nursemaid described, and from that time to the present, nearly every day, and sometimes several times in the day, the same has been heard by one or more of the occupants of the house. It's important to note that Joseph never wanted his diary to be published, so he wasn't recording claims of the paranormal in order to achieve any type of notoriety. He and his wife Elizabeth despised the attention the alleged haunting garnered their family, and seldom spoke about it with anyone but those with which they shared a close relationship. The only reason we even have Joseph Proctor's diary today is because of his eldest son Edmund, who was born and raised in the haunted house of Willington Mill. Edmund had been cleaning out his father's study after his father died in 1875 when he happened to stumble across the diary and decided to send it to the Society for Psychical Research for publication. According to Joseph's diary and other first-hand accounts, within a month of January 23, 1835, each of the Proctor children, almost every single one of the house servants, The groundskeeper, his wife, Elizabeth, and Joseph had all encountered ghosts in one way or another. Joseph was extremely hesitant to believe the haunting was real, but eventually, after he ruled out every other possible explanation through exhaustive testing and experimentation, the renowned man of intelligence was forced to accept what everyone else in the house already had, that there were ghosts amongst them. When he came to that monumental realization, he wrote the following in his diary: "Those who deem all intrusion from the world of spirits impossible in the present will feel assured that a natural solution for the noise will still be obtained on further investigation. Whilst those who believe with the poet that millions of spiritual creatures slake the earth unseen, and that in modern times amidst 1,000 creations of fancy, fear, fraud, or superstition, there still remains some well-attested instance in which good or evil spirits have manifested their presence by sensible tokens, will probably deem it possible that this may be referred to the latter class. At first, it was mostly auditory phenomena that plagued the house. Thunderous footsteps reverberating from that abandoned room, other rooms, and hallways. Mumbled whispers coming from everywhere at once. The sound of what Joseph described as a large piece of wood snapping in half right next to his ear, and sharp metal blades scraping along stones. Everyone in the house agreed the center of the spirit activity seemed to be that abandoned third-floor bedroom above the nursery. And although all the inhabitants of the house experienced the entity in one way or another, the spirit seemed to gravitate towards the young Proctor children the most. Here are a few entries from Joseph Proctor's diary about the spiritual phenomena that was witnessed by his children or around them. On the night of the 31st of the first month, soon after retiring to bed, before going to sleep, my wife and I both heard 10 or 12 obtuse deadened beats as of a mallet on a block of wood, apparently within 2 feet of the bed curtain, in one side by the crib in which the child was laid. On the 13th of last month, November, early in the evening, 2 of the children in the house, one aged about 8, the other under 2 years, both saw, unknown to each other, an object which could not be real, a glowing orb of sorts, and which went into the room where the apparition of a woman was afterwards seen and disappeared there. And for something much more horrifying, for a 3-year period, the Proctor children would relentlessly complain to their parents of an old woman, perhaps the witch once rumored to live on the cottage, or on a cottage in the property, that muttered incomprehensible things to them while they slept, and the people they heard whispering their names from inside their individual chamber closets while they prepared for bed in the early evenings. And if you're thinking that this is nothing more than the imaginations of children who have been primed to believe they might hear things like this, since they live with adults who now believe their home is haunted, the kids were not alone in witnessing this phenomena. Almost a dozen adults, including a nursemaid, at least 4 servants, a few visiting family members, and Mr. and Mrs. Proctor themselves also heard these voices firsthand while in the children's bedrooms on multiple occasions. In addition to the hushed, disembodied murmurs that called out to him, one of the youngest Proctor children, Joseph Jr., was also tormented throughout the night by something far more sinister. In the midst of almost every single night since the haunting first began, the little boy would wake up crying for help, and every night he would tell the nursemaid, or his mother or his father, whoever happened to make it to his bedchamber first, that someone had just been standing at the foot of his crib, and that he could hear them screaming. In defense of his older brother's claims, Edmund Proctor later wrote this: "The inference that my brother Joseph was simply dreaming, or else shamming, so as to get someone to come beside him will no doubt readily occur to some minds. I can only say that a more truthful boy, or one more transparently honest, I do not think ever breathed. He was 6 years of age at this time, and died 11 years afterwards from an accidental blow to the head at boarding school." Although Joseph Sr. never actually saw an entity standing over his sleeping son, he did claim to hear it. According to his diary, when he went to go check on Joseph Jr. one night, Joseph Sr. found him curled up in the corner of his little bed, quote, trembling and perspiring from fright, and silently pointing at the spot in the air just above the far end of his bed. Joseph Sr. had no idea what his son could be pointing at. They looked to be alone in the room, and everything inside it seemed to be in its ordinary place. But then, as he took to comforting the little boy, Joseph Sr. heard it, the distinct resonant sound of someone's labored, guttural, and slow breathing. Like every inhale was a knife to their dying lungs. And it definitely wasn't coming from his son. It was coming from the air, directly from above the foot of his bed. Another one of the Proctor children that witnessed the entity firsthand was 4-year-old Jane. One winter evening, the little girl was overwhelmed by the uneasy feeling that someone was in the room with her. She sat up straight in her bed and looked around, Luckily, as others later attested to, the sky was cloudless that night and the moon was almost full, so there was a fair amount of light pouring into the room. This allowed her to see a disembodied head clearly. The pale face was that of an old woman, perhaps the witch again, and she was staring at Jane from underneath her watchstand, between the thin linen curtains that cascaded over it. The specter's mouth was open like she was screaming, but no sound came out. As the years went on, the haunting of the house at Willington Mill became more severe, more grim. No longer was the spirit or spirits simply making noise and appearing to sleeping children. It was now moving furniture, grasping at people's arms and legs as they ascended the stairs. How terrifying would that be? Ringing the servant's bell from empty rooms, manifesting for brief moments on the landing of the third floor or within the children's bedrooms, or sometimes standing behind the children themselves. Other adults would witness that. Within 2 years of the first paranormal incident, the entity was also no longer confined to the house itself. It had spread throughout the property. The foreman of Willington Mill was a fellow named Thomas Mann. The well-respected and skeptical foreman, alongside his wife and young daughter, lived in a large laborer's cottage that was actually attached to the steam mill itself. As foreman, his duty was to attend to the mill's engine throughout the night, after everyone else had gone home. And at around 1 a.m. one evening, Thomas was doing just that when his work was interrupted by a very strange and very specific sound. You see, back then, in order to transport water across the expansive mill yard, the company had a massive wooden cistern that was attached to a platform with iron wheels. According to Thomas Mann, when in motion, this machine is drawn by a horse, and it makes a very peculiar noise, which may be heard a considerable distance, especially when the wheels want greasing, and by any person accustomed to it, the noise of it going could not be mistaken for that of anything else. That was the sound that Thomas Mann heard that night, the clunky, squeaking machine being pulled across the vacant mill yard. At first, the foreman thought the machine was being stolen, so he bolted out of the engine room and ran towards the noise. Joseph Proctor later wrote, "He heard this machine going along the yard. It was creaking excessively, from want of oil as might be supposed, and was then drawing near the yard gates, towards which he pursued after it, when to his astonishment he found it had never stirred from its place near where it first was, and looking round everywhere, all was still, and not a creature to be found. He afterwards searched round the premise with a lantern, but descried nothing. He was much puzzled, but it was not till the next day that he felt himself compelled to attribute the phenomenon to a supernatural cause." Unfortunately for him, that was not the last time Thomas Mann would encounter one of the ghosts of Willington Mill. In the winter of 1841, Elizabeth Proctor's sister, Christina Wright, was visiting the family. It had been 7 years now since the first haunting began, and after experiencing one too many terrifying things in her sister's house, including one evening in 1837 when her bed started to levitate in the middle of the night, Christina Wright refused to stay again with the Proctor family in their home. Instead, she stayed with Thomas Mann and his wife and daughter in their cottage, which, as I went over earlier, was also on the family property. One evening, after Christina had already gone to bed at 9:30 p.m., Thomas's wife went outside to gather some coals for the fire. As she did this nightly chore, something odd caught her eye in the window of the Proctor's home, which was about a third of an acre away. It was the nebulous, misty form of a woman walking back and forth across the Proctor's master bedroom. The foreman's wife said the specter was, quote, very luminous and likewise transparent, and had the appearance of a priest in a white surplice or a woman in a white gown. Frantic, Mrs. Mann screamed for her husband, who instantly came running outside to help. He too saw the specter in the window, and at that very moment he breathlessly uttered the words, "Dear God, is that her?" The figure abruptly stopped her pacing, turned to face the window, and stared directly at him across the black night. Woken up by Mrs. Mann's screams, Christina Wright joined the couple outside to see what all the ruckus was about. When she asked what was wrong, they simply pointed to the Proctor's house and at the figure in the window. And now she too witnessed the ghost. She claimed that by the time she got outside, the spirit's glow was starting to fade, until eventually it disappeared completely. After that, Christina Wright never stayed at Willington Mill again, not anywhere on the property, not even at the foreman's house. Similarly, after just one evening spent in the haunted house in the late 1830s, Mrs. Proctor's brother told her that, quote, he would not live in that house for any amount of money. Despite Joseph Proctor's best efforts to keep the outside world from learning what supernatural horrors were occurring in his home, word of the extraordinary happenings got out, and soon he and his family were inundated with letters from parapsychologists and spiritualists and priests alike, requesting to spend the night in his house to see the ghosts for themselves. Joseph Proctor denied or ignored the vast majority of these requests, all except for one, it seems. On the 17th of June, 1840, Joseph received a letter from Edward Drury, a well-respected surgeon from the nearby town of Sunderland. In his letter, Edward wrote, "To Mr. Proctor, Sir, having heard from indisputable authority that is my excellent friend Mr. Davison, the farmer of Low Willington, that you and your family are disturbed by most unaccountable noises at night, I beg leave to tell you that I have read attentively other people's accounts of such things, but with, I must confess, no great belief. But an account of this report coming from one of your sect, which I admire for candor and simplicity, my curiosity is excited to a high pitch, which I would fain satisfy. My desire is to remain alone in the house all night with no companion but my own watchdog, in which, as far as courage and fidelity are concerned, I place much more reliance than upon any 3 young gentlemen I know of. And it is also my hope that, if I have a fair trial, I shall be able to unravel this mystery. Mr. Davison will give you every satisfaction if you take the trouble to inquire of him concerning me. I am, sir, yours, most respectively, Edward Drury of No. 10 Church Street, Sunderland." Surprisingly, Joseph agreed to allow Edward Drury, along with his companion Thomas Hudson, a renowned chemist, and his faithful guard dog, to spend one night in his home while the rest of the Proctor family and house staff were out of town visiting a faraway aunt. On July 3rd of 1840, Edward Drury and Thomas Hudson arrived at the house, and they were greeted by Joseph Proctor and Thomas Mann. Upon their arrival, the 2 investigators examined every corner of the house, and after they were satisfied that the structure was secure and that no one else was present, Joseph and the foreman took their leave, and Edward and Thomas began their stay. These are the 2 letters Edward Drury later sent to Joseph Proctor after their stay at his allegedly haunted house after he had left and it had ended. July 6, 1840, the surgeon wrote, "To Mr. Proctor, Dear Sir, I am sorry I was not at home to receive you yesterday when you kindly called to inquire for me. I am happy to state that I have been so little affected as I am after that horrid and most awful affair in your home. The only bad physical effect that I feel is a heavy dullness in one of my ears, the right one. I call it a heavy dullness because I not only do not hear distinctly, but feel it in a constant noise. This I never was affected with before, but I doubt not it will go off. I am persuaded that no one went to your house at any time more disbelieving in respect to seeing anything peculiar than myself, and now no one can be more satisfied than myself. I will in the course of a few days send you a full detail of all I saw and heard, but sir, could I account for these noises from natural causes? If so, I would. But so firmly am I persuaded of the horrid apparition that I would affirm that what I saw with my ears was a punishment for me for scoffing and unbelief. Above all things, it will be a great cause of joy to me if you never allow your young family to be in that horrid house ever again. Hoping you will write a few lines at your leisure, I remain, dear sir, yours very truly, Edward Drury." A week later, July 13th, 1840, he wrote again, "Dear sir, I hereby, according to promise in my last letter, forward you a true account of what I heard and saw at your house, in which I was led to pass the night from various rumors circulated by most respectable parties, particularly from an account by my esteemed friend Mr. Davison, whose name I mentioned to you in a former letter. Having received your sanction to visit your mysterious dwelling, I went on the 3rd of July, accompanied by a friend of mine, Thomas Hudson. I must here mention that, not expecting you at home, I had in my pocket a brace of pistols, determining in my mind to let one of them drop before the foreman, Thomas Mann, as if by accident, for fear he should presume to play some tricks upon me. But after my interview with you, I felt there was no occasion for weapons, and I did not load them, after you allowed us to inspect as minutely as we pleased every portion of the house. I sat down on the 3rd-story landing, fully expecting to account for any noises that I might hear, in a philosophical manner. This was about 11 o'clock p.m. About 10 minutes to 12, we both heard a noise, as if a number of people were pattering with their bare feet upon the floor, and yet so singular was the noise that I could not minutely determine whence it proceeded. A few minutes afterward, we heard a noise as if someone was knocking with his knuckles among our feet. This was followed by a hollow cough from the very room from which the apparition proceeded. The only noise after this was as if a person was rustling against the wall and coming up the stairs. At 1:45, I told my friend that, feeling a little cold, I would like to go to bed, as we might hear the noise equally well there. He replied that he would not go to bed till daylight. I took up a note which I had accidentally dropped and began to read it, after which I took out my watch to ascertain the time and found that it wanted 10 minutes to 1. In taking my eyes from the watch, they became riveted upon a closet door, which I distinctly saw open, and saw also the figure of a female attired in grayish garments, with the head inclining downward and one hand pressed upon the chest as if in pain, and the right hand extended down towards the floor with the index finger pointing downward. It advanced with an apparently cautious step across the floor towards me. Immediately as it approached my friend, who was slumbering, its right hand was extended towards him. I then rushed at it, giving a most awful yell, but instead of grasping it, I fell upon my friend, and I recollected nothing distinctly for nearly 3 hours afterwards, and I recollected nothing distinctly. I have since learned that I was carried down the stairs in an agony of fear and terror. I hereby certify that the above account is strictly true and correct in every respect. Yours, Edward Drury. And who did Edward see and try and grab? Perhaps the Willington witch, the woman who, before the Proctor family ever built their mill, lived in a cottage on the land. Who was she? Her name seems lost to history. The witch is believed to be just one of many spirits who haunt the mill house. Finally, in 1847, no longer able to take any more terror, the Proctors left their home and business for good. Edmund Proctor wrote, "Finding life in the house to be no longer tolerable, fearing also an unhappy effect, if not a permanent injury, on the minds of their children should they remain longer in such a plague-ridden dwelling, they finally left it in 1847. He said that the haunting continued right up until the very last night they were in the home. He wrote, "My parents have both repeatedly told me that during the last night they slept in the old house, the rest of the family having preceded them to the new one, there were continuous noises throughout the night, boxes being apparently dragged with heavy thuds down the now carpetless stairs, non-human footsteps stumped on the floors, doors were or seemed to be clashed, and impossible furniture corded at random or dragged hither and thither by inscrutable agency. In short, a pantomimic or spiritualistic repetition of all the noises incident to a household flitting. A miserable night my father and mother had of it, as I have often heard from their own lips, not so much from terror at the unearthly noises, for to these they were habituated, as dread lest this fanfaronade might portend the contemporary flight of the unwelcome visitors to the new abode." The old mill house was now divided up into multiple units, and those units were rented out to mill employees, and they would also claim to see apparitions and be tormented with strange noises and the feeling of malevolent entities in their midst for decades. In 1865, the flour mill was closed for good, and then the building was used for a variety of purposes for many years going forward, primarily as a warehouse. In 1891, one of the scariest accounts to ever come from the property was reported. On this occasion, the mill was working night and day when the engine man, on going into the engine house at midnight, saw an eyeless woman sitting there. With a wild scream, he flung himself out of the window into the gut, plunged through the mud and water to the opposite side, never stopped running until he reached home at Shields, some 3 miles off. The building is still standing today, and reports of encounters with a variety of entities continue to trickle in.
Dang.
Long-standing haunting.
Yeah. And sounds like still something's up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and like I like that the rumors of the area being haunted go back before this building was even built. You know, to like legends of like a witch in a little hut somewhere on the property there. So like for centuries now, people have been reporting all kinds of apparitions in this location.
Well, to be clear, women are not to be fucked with. So there's that.
Yeah, maybe somebody did some bad stuff to a lady who wasn't a witch. I mean, she wasn't, of course.
Of course not.
I don't think. And then her spirit somehow was able to has been able to haunt them ever since.
I like it. I support her.
Do you want to see some pictures?
I do.
Okay, this first one. This is a drawing of the original haunted mill. This was in the Monthly Chronicle of North Country Lore and Legend.
North Country Lore and Legend.
Published in 1887.
Okay. I mean, it's really like not that exciting.
Mm-hmm. Just like an old like what would have been kind of like a factory type. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just very hard angles. I mean, just really nothing exciting.
And here's a picture of it in 2020. You know, most of the buildings still standing.
Okay, that is exactly how I remember Newcastle. Great.
Oh yeah. Here's a portrait of 19th century scholar and historian William Howitt. This is from 1863.
Willem.
Okay. And then AI rendering of how Molly Box, who assembled this story, this is one of her favorite stories, I guess, imagines the ghost lady to look like.
Oh yeah, no thanks.
Mm-hmm. And then a AI rendering of what she thinks her face looks like.
Oh, well, that's not really scary so much as that is sad.
But if you saw that,
Well, yeah, that would scare the living behemoths out of me,
yeah, exactly.
but not like not a mouth
Yeah.
stretched too thin
No.
or eyes too large or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, all the other tropes.
Yep.
What was really hard for me to not like giggle up about
Yeah.
is that I've been to Newcastle and it is a very thick accent.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
almost, I was there with somebody who is English and she was like, oh boy, this is going to be rough. And I was
Yeah,
like, what
just
do
to
you mean?
understand them.
And she was like, it's like its own dialect here. And I was like, okay, whatever. Just like ignorant American.
Yeah.
And then they would say like these other people we were with, and I would look at my friend Poppy and I was like, what's that now? And she was like, even I don't know. And so, but I was imagining all these flowery, beautiful words
Yeah.
with this very thick accent and just being like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know.
The UK is fascinating that way to me, where geographically, obviously, is not nearly as big as the US, not even close.
Yeah.
But there is more, it feels like, linguistic diversity as far as accents on that island
Yeah.
than in the entire US.
I love it because it is quite distinct.
And they'll
Know, they'll be like, oh, that's a Brighton accent.
Right.
That's, a Birmingham accent. That's
Yeah.
a Newcastle accent. And you're
Scottish
like,
brogue and
yeah.
Welsh. There's like the Welsh accent. Yeah, it's crazy where it's like, like obviously we have our like, California, like surfer kind of talk, Valley Girl,
How dare you.
Southern accent.
Yeah.
Like New York, Philly. There's definitely variations, but it feels like another language.
It does.
In places, in England.
I know. I was just talking to a girlfriend recently and she's like, well, like your Midwest accent. I was like, my what now?
Mm-hmm.
And I never hear my own accent
Yeah.
until I've been back in Ohio.
Mhm.
And then I'm around my family and I'm like, my God, what are you guys saying right now? Don't you speak English?
And I've been accused of having like a touch of like a Southern accent sometimes.
Uh-huh.
It's just a rural accent.
Rural, mhm.
Yep. It's like, because it's kind of like across the U.S., there is a lot of commonalities in like people just, little tiny towns.
Yeah. I thought an interesting fact from this story was that I did not know before was that tales of hauntings and ghosts and such were reserved for the poor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how things have changed, over the years and they cycle around. But yeah, in like the early Victorian era, which I can see, just thinking about like British culture, like that posh kind of upper class sensibility of like, that's for fools or whatever, very dismissive.
Yes.
And then, people like, like people raised more poor over there. There was more superstition, less education.
Sure.
But I like, I really like this story because it came out of like the upper kind of echelon.
Yeah, me too. I just had never heard that before. Okay, and then my last question before we move on, about, I don't know, I was looking at the time. It was about 20-ish minutes into the show. Your voice did a very strange thing in my ears.
Oh, huh.
And for about one split second, I was like, is that my husband? It was like a very weird sound in my ears.
Oh.
So, friends listening, I just want to know if anybody else heard that. And I should have made better note of what you were speaking on or precisely where it was. But
maybe I was just fighting some heartburn or something, but it was not like that?
No, it sounded demonic.
Weird.
My heart was in my stomach for a minute, and then I kept waiting for it to happen again, and then I felt on edge the rest of the story, where I just kind of, my eyes were darting around. I was looking a lot like, okay, I mean, it is late. I am tired.
Yeah.
But
I
mean,
I didn't hear it.
If you are possessed by a
it
demon,
wasn't
you have to
intentional.
tell me.
Not that I know of.
Okay, great. All right, well then.
Okay, are you ready to move on to my Staten Island story now?
Yes, I am.
There's a decent amount of historical setup for this one as well. The Kreischer Mansion is a historic home located on a hill in Staten Island in New York City. Sits just off of Arthur Kill Road, and considering its dark history, that street's name is appropriate. The home was built in 1885 by German immigrant, here's a name, Balthasar Kreischer. He came to New York in 1836.
It has to be related to Bert Kreischer, because Balthazar, I think like a shortened version, like an Americanized shortened version of that like Bartholomew, Bert, like,
Yeah, maybe.
get him on the phone.
Balthazar came to New York in 1836, quickly made a name for himself as a successful brick manufacturer. His factory was initially located in the Lower East Side of Manhattan before he relocated to Staten Island in the mid-1870s. His brickworks factory was so successful and employed so many people, it led to an economic boom that helped further develop the area. Staten Island's Charleston neighborhood was actually originally named Kreischerville to honor his contributions before the name was changed during World War I. Kreischer had twin mansions built on top of Kreischer Hill for two of his sons, Edward and Charles. He died just 1 year after they were completed in 1886 at the age of 73. And sadly, his son Edward died of suicide less than a decade later on June 8, 1894. He shot himself in the right temple near the former Kreischerville brick factory. Edward entered the office that day, the day he died, around 8 a.m. He appeared to be in a good mood. He joked around with several employees, left the building to walk down to the pier, stood for a while watching a boat being unloaded, and that was the last time he was seen alive. Soon after 9 a.m., a young worker was getting some water near the brickworks building when he saw a man lying in a pool of blood with a pistol by his side. He ran back and told his coworkers what he saw. Several others followed him and realized the dead man was Edward Kreischer. Some immediately questioned the circumstances surrounding his death. Edward's brother George couldn't think of a reason why his brother would end his life, but he noted that Edward complained of severe pains in his head for about a week leading up to the death. The family thought his head pains were caused by overwork. They said his marriage was happy and business was good. However, Edward's close friends said he had been troubled for more than a year by business conflicts he had with his brother George. George held a controlling interest in the company because he had purchased his sister's shares. According to the original 1894 coverage by the New York Tribune, Edward's wife Frida was so shocked by her husband's death that she fell unconscious for hours and was reported to be in critical condition. Ever since 1894, Edward's former home has reportedly been haunted by his spirit. A few years later, the family brickworks factory burned to the ground. It was rebuilt by another family member who then retired in 1899, and then the business was transferred out of the family. During the 1930s, Charles Kreischer's mansion on Kreischer Hill, Kreischer's mansion, was either demolished or destroyed in a fire, and now only Edward's old mansion remains. Time now for the tale of the haunting of Kreischer Mansion. For many years, there have been claims that the Kreischer Mansion is haunted by multiple spirits, including not just Edward, but the ghost of Edward's widow, Frida. Visitors have reported strange noises and lights on the property, which may be cursed, as no business or residence has managed to stay there long term. The property was once home to a restaurant that failed in 1997. Patrons and employees both reported hearing loud banging, witnessing doors slamming on their own, and photos being thrown off of the walls. In the late 1990s, a developer named Isaac Yomtavian bought the property with the intention of a restoration. He hoped to create a senior community for those aged 55 plus. In August of 2006, he received approval to construct 130 condos on the property, planned to preserve the mansion as a social hall for the residents. But those plans never came to fruition because of problems with the market, delays in getting permits, and a murder that seems to have increased the intensity of the haunting. In April of 2005, Robert McKelvey was murdered, dismembered, and disposed of on the property. Joseph Joe Black Young was a caretaker that Yomtovian had hired to live in the mansion in exchange for securing the property, mowing the lawn, and just doing basic maintenance. And unbeknownst to Yomtovian, Young was a hitman for the infamous Bonanno crime family. And he'd been paid $8,000 to carry out a hit with 3 accomplices. The victim was 39-year-old Robert McKelvey, who had been slow to pay a debt he owed to the mob. Young lured him to the mansion, attempted to strangle him, but McKelvey broke free, tried to run. Young pursued, tackled him, and then repeatedly stabbed him, then dragged him to a pond on the property and drowned him to finish him off. It was a long, drawn-out, brutal murder. Young and 3 accomplices then used hacksaws to dismember the body and then burn the remains in the mansion's furnace. Meanwhile, McKelvey's spirit was reportedly McKelvey's spirit has reportedly been seen haunting the property, as were numerous other spirits in addition to Edward and Frida Kreischer. In 2019, concert promoter Rick Rispoli said that while he was preparing for a concert series at the mansion, he and his assistant walked in and heard a woman crying. His assistant Elizabeth Marino recalled, "We came in one day and heard doors slamming and a woman crying on the second floor. Then we heard what sounded like a child's footsteps." Rispoli claimed that the very same day he walked out the front door, and it promptly slammed behind him, causing him to think to himself, well, I guess I'm leaving. Carla Gower, who also worked with Rispoli, said she saw an apparition of a young boy in 2018 while she was settling up for a hayride in the haunted house event. Gower recalled, I was on the back of the hayride. Part of the act was me getting pulled off the hayride, and every time he, an actor, pulled me off, I saw a young boy running around. We thought it was the son of one of the actresses, but she didn't bring her kid that day. Elizabeth Marina was also witness to this paranormal incident. She said, we had someone driving a tractor and there was this little boy running around. The driver said, someone has to tell the boy to move. He's going to get hurt. There have been additional reports of a young boy wandering the property, believed to be one of Balthazar Kreischer's many children. He may be Henry Kreischer, Balthazar's son, with his first wife, Caroline, who died at the age of 6. Although rare, there have been sightings of a woman in a Victorian dress as well, sitting on the porch. And a few people have reportedly again seen the spirits of Edward and Frida roaming about the property in recent years. Rispoli claimed that he has also captured orbs of light in the house with his phone. The orbs were seen near the entrance, and he witnessed them grow in size and move around the home. The mansion is currently owned by Eric Bischoff and Julia Mackey, who plan to turn it into a wedding and event venue. Only time will tell if they're able to bring their vision to life or if the ghosts of Kreischer Mansion will scare the owners away.
I mean, I got to tell you,
Yeah.
I don't think that they should be doing a wedding event venue. It's like just double down on the horror.
Oh, yeah, just make it more of like a haunted attraction.
Because there are plenty of people who, are into the paranormal, are actual practicing witches.
Could be a haunted wedding venue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You really need to play that up.
Yeah, maybe
Let's be
they will.
realistic. Well, let's get them on the phone. We're good at business.
Here's a picture of the Kreischer Mansion in recent years. This is from Wikipedia.
You guys have them call us at 1-800-BUSINESS. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, if it was
Really
restored
cool.
properly.
Yeah.
It's a really cool property because it's right there on Staten Island, but it's got a lot of, it's got acreage and stuff, and it's up on a hill, so you got like good views.
Yeah.
I love those kind of places where you are in the city, but also like it feels rural when you're at the place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Gorgeous veranda. I mean, okay, now that photo is creepy as all get out.
Just a photo taken at dusk,
God.
the right filters, right time of year.
I feel like somebody's going to just, like an image of a person, is going to suddenly appear in that tower.
Just right up in that little area there.
Ugh.
Yeah, that's from abandonednyc.com.
Okay, so this
Cool
is
little
before
website.
the new owners bought it. Got it.
And this is a historical photo from around 1900 that shows the twin mansions of Charles and Edward Kreischer from slive.com. I think it's like Staten Island Live, basically. So you can see what they look like, back then when the whole area was a lot more rural.
Twin mansions. I mean,
I know that the dad built for the sons.
I hope our kids aren't listening. We're not building twin mansions, you guys.
Lower your expectations.
Twin nothing.
And-
We'll get you matching sweatshirts.
And it's been used for a variety of purposes. This is kind of cool. They had like a rock concert just
That
on
is
the
cool.
porch there and people listening in the yard. I think it was like a little like mini festival one time. That's also from slive.com.
Okay.
And that's all I got.
That's all you got. I want to talk to Bert Kreischer. I have questions.
Find out if he's related.
Well, I think his family's from Florida.
I think he grew up in Florida.
Yeah.
But who knows if you trace it back a little further, if they were in New York.
I mean,
Or had some kind of family members in New York.
Probably. I mean, we all kind of come from New York.
Yeah, I guess most of us.
Yeah.
From Ellis Island, if our family's been in this country for any length of time.
Exactly. So you can probably trace it all back there. That was a really interesting story.
Yeah, I like that those were, we do a lot of modern encounters, which I do love.
You do.
But sometimes I love just to have these where there's just, lots of witnesses, lots of articles written about it, or, like old newspaper clippings and stuff. Not that the modern encounters, are not credible because they're modern. It's just like one person claiming. But I do like to have those stories of like multiple people seeing a variety of things in the same area.
Sure.
Over many years.
I love the history because I think it is just a reminder that it's a tale as old as time.
Oh, yeah.
Just like boy meets girl, boy and girl fall in love, whatever, boy meets boy, girl meets girl, whatever version of that story is applicable to your life. Horror stories and sightings and thinking that you see something out of the corner of your eye. It's just as common as, everybody dies. Everybody's lost somebody.
Mhm.
Like, it's just, I love this commonality
Yeah.
of this
Yeah.
very specific thing that ties us all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Claims of the supernatural. I'm sure they go back to, caveman days.
Oh, I would imagine so.
Mm-hmm.
Those might have been that they found some funny mushrooms.
There's
But
also those stories going all the way back.
absolutely. Okay, well, are you ready to get settled in for my side of the show?
I am.
And do you have a little Layla?
I do.
Okay, is that black or purple black?
Black, yeah.
Got me on my knees, Layla. I can't believe we don't sing that every week.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, here we go with my first tale, a confirmation tale from the other side.
Nice.
You could call this paranormal, or you could just call it weird. I'll let you form your own opinions. This is the one personal experience I've had that has made me rethink my choices to abandon the faith my family typically followed. I was raised casually religious, so casually, in fact, that I'm not even sure what flavor of Christianity I was raised in. I was baptized at my church at some point, and I went to church most Sundays for a while when I was in elementary school. But then we moved to a new town when I was, 8, 9. And once we moved, my parents maybe didn't seem to care to find a new church or drive one town over to go back to our old church. So we went less and less frequently. Eventually, I started to question why I had to specifically go to worship my religion in a particular building, and an all-powerful being couldn't just be content with me believing from my own home. This made for a fun Easter morning when I announced this to my mom. From that point on, I just didn't really vibe with the overall concept of organized religion. I never fully counted out the possibility of a higher power or a creator, though. But I felt that even if something like that did exist, there was no chance we had it figured out and knew exactly how to please it. This left me at odds with my father's side of our family, as most of them are staunch Catholics. I was once judged very heavily by my grandmother for accepting communion at a funeral in a Catholic church. I had no idea that it was a different concept than accepting communion at a congregational church, but it turns out I made Jesus weep, or something like that. Jokes aside, I try not to openly discuss my opposition to their worship as much as possible. Back in 2015, I grew quite ill rather quickly. While trying to figure out what was wrong with me, my paternal grandfather was in the later stages of his own health battle with brain cancer. In August of 2015, my dad and I took a trip to visit him, and we were both fairly certain it would be the last time we saw him alive. I felt like actual garbage the entire time we were visiting him. I had no energy, which meant that I slept a lot. My grandfather liked to joke around sometimes. Actually, a better way to put it would be he loved to fuck with people. He was once staying with my aunt, ate an entire tub of ice cream she had purchased for herself, and then put the spoon inside the empty container inside the freezer for her to find. He was a big offer to pay for dinner, but then mysteriously can't find his wallet, only for it to be found somewhere else kind of guy. But during this trip, he was not doing so hot. The comedy and the laughs were few and far between, except for one incident. My dad and grandfather sat on the couch to watch a baseball game, which meant I had a few hours where I didn't have to move at all. After eating a few grapes that were put on the coffee table for us to snack on, I took a nap. I turned my back to the TV and knocked out. A few hours later, I woke up because I felt something tickling my neck. I reached over to swat away what I thought was a bug, only to find a discarded grape stem? Confused, I sat up and watched another 6 or 7 grape stems fall from weird crevices all around my body. I was covered in dozens of tiny little grape stems. I must have looked bewildered in my post-nap delirium. I could see my grandfather, though, absolutely losing it with laughter. This was the funniest thing he'd ever seen or done in recent memory. While I was passed out on the couch, he was eating grapes, and when nothing was left but the stem, he'd gently throw it at me to see how long it would take for me to wake up. A day or two later, my dad and I drove away from the house for the last time. About a month later, I was at the hospital for yet another diagnostic run. We still had not figured out what was wrong with my body. I awoke from the procedure expecting to head home. However, I was informed that I wouldn't be leaving the hospital for at least a week. And oh, by the way, your grandfather passed away while you were unconscious. That was not a good day for me, needless to say. The hospital stay went well for me. We figured out my health issues, and I slowly grew better. In the summer of 2019, I moved out of my parents' house and into an apartment with some friends. We were still adjusting to one another, that being everyone's first time living on their own, but for the most part, everything was going well. My roommates were fairly decent about picking up after themselves, and we enjoyed being able to hang out all the time. One morning, not long after we had moved in, I walked into the kitchen to make breakfast before leaving for work. I saw some discarded grape stems lying on the kitchen table. I grabbed them and thought, that's weird, and threw them in the trash and moved on with my day. That night, I came home to complete my usual routine of not doing my homework. I was sitting in my room alone when my phone rang. It was my dad. It wasn't unusual for my dad to call me randomly every now and again, so I didn't think much of it. We exchanged the general basics, and then he asked, "How have you been doing?" Fine, I guess. How about you, Dad? Oh, well, today's a tough day for me. It's been 4 years now. Oh, shit. As he said that, my brain basically blue screened. I couldn't form a coherent thought or sentence. I stammered for a few seconds while realizing exactly what the day was. I ended our conversation abruptly a few minutes later and began to process what had happened earlier that day. My roommate, who is the only person I had seen buy grapes, who had been enjoying grapes with his breakfast every morning for weeks before this, who had never ever left his trash on the table any morning prior to that day, just so happened to not clean up after his breakfast and leave grape stems lying out for me. And it just so happened to be 4 years to the exact day of my grandfather passing, of which my final memory of him involved grape stems. I cannot express how much this one thing has made me question my stance on religion, or a world after this one, or even ghosts. Nobody knew the grape stem story. I never told my friends about it. It didn't even seem that significant. I hadn't ever told them the specific day my grandfather had died or the specific day I had been admitted to the hospital. There was no way they could have planned this. Somehow, somewhere, my grandfather was there laughing his ass off. I just knew it. There's no better way to fuck with someone than to make them question everything they've ever thought about death and existence. And he got me good one last time. Thank you both for what you do. I hope you enjoyed the story. All my best, Cam.
Oh, thank you, Cam.
Yeah.
I did like that story.
Yeah, it's sweet.
And that's one of those ones. I mean, we've had a few similar to those over the years, those little like confirmation possible stories. And I like it where it's like, it's a light thing. Like, yeah, it could just be coincidence.
Totally.
But that is one hell of a coincidence. 4 years to the day, roommate never ever did that before, and such a specific thing. Little tiny grape stems scattered around.
I know, that is so uber specific.
I mean, I also, if I'm Cam, would make that exact same connection.
100%. And also like Cam, now I'm questioning everything because I am not a faith person, a person of faith. Like now I'm like, should I rethink that? Like what does happen when we go to the other side? And then I just start manufacturing ideas of how I'm going to haunt our children. I'm like, okay, I should probably start doing something really uber specific right now. That's kind of annoying, but also kind of funny. So that when I die, I can come back and do it. And they can be like, God bless America. She's still doing it from the other side. I don't know what it is, but I think we should work on it.
I know I've made my peace with just like, if I die, thinking that I'll probably just like dissipate in my, as my body breaks down, I'll become part of this vegetable and part of this tree or maybe part of the other living organism as they like use my body for nutrients or whatever, like that whole cycle of life.
Sure.
And I'm okay with that. But how cool would it be to like, you're dying one moment and then, you're the lights fade and you're gone to the world here. And then your consciousness just pops up on the other side. And now you're able to like look into this world. I mean, that would be so beyond wild. Because if that happened, okay, what's really exciting about that, now all bets are off for your spirit. Now you're like,
buddy.
Like what are the rules? Am I immortal? Am I going to some other place? Like, a lot of religions believe. Is there an endless series of journeys throughout the universe and other dimensions? You get to go on these adventures. Oh, it'd open up any cool possibility.
Okay, what if in life you were never afforded the opportunity or ability to see the world, but now you can go anywhere you want anytime?
Oh, yeah.
I love that idea. I like when you say you can go on
ghost tourist.
Yeah, well, it's like if you can go on adventures and if you're living in another realm, I don't feel like the social constructs of this world matter. Like you don't need money, you know, you don't need clothing, you don't need food. You're just a thing floating around. But if you have enough, I don't know, consciousness, I guess, to like absorb it and understand what you're doing, how cool is that?
What if the next world or next dimension or whatever is so much cooler than this one that like the coolest thing in this world pales in comparison to just an average thing there?
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's have adventures.
When I went for my angel oracle card reading, I found out that apparently every night I'm astral projecting.
Huh. All right.
Very interesting. Explains why I've been sleeping a lot. I was like, okay. She's like, you know you do that, right? And I was like, no. Let's pretend you didn't say that, Jean Ann.
Do I go anywhere? Or I don't really dream much, so I'm probably just staying there.
I'm
probably hold down the fort while you're gallivanting about.
Well, I don't know. We should go see Jean Ann and
Jean Ann.
get you a reading.
Okay.
She's 69 years old, and I want her to be my grandma.
Okay.
Or my mom. Actually, my mom is also going to be 69.
Good energy.
Oh my gosh, the best. The best. Okay, now are you ready for a more proper haunted tale?
I am.
All right, let's go investigate. I've been interested in the paranormal for as long as I can remember, and I've had a few experiences, but this one takes the cake. I'm from a small town called Joplin, Missouri. We aren't known for much. An F5 tornado that blew through here in 2011, and a handful of paranormal folklore tales. The Spook Light is probably the most well-known. The Spook Light is located close to the Missouri-Oklahoma border on a road affectionately named Spook Light Road, but technically called E50 Road. The Spook Light was first officially notated in 1881, but there are unofficial reports of American Indians seeing the Spook Light on the Trail of Tears. It is a curious thing. You almost never twice have the same experience with it. It may appear as a dim light or a bright light at the crest of a hill or off in the distance. It may grow brighter or dimmer, bob, or move around. And according to my mother, one night it even shot through the windshield of her car and seared a hole in her back seat. It's a common sight to see cars parked up and down the ditch of Spooklight Road, waiting for their own experience. Near Spooklight Road is Hoffman's Mansion, a place with its own troubling history. Rumor has it the Hoffman family ran a summer camp for children. Instead of providing them a peaceful sanctuary, the property caretaker tortured and subsequently killed them before hanging himself on a tree close to a cemetery on the mansion grounds. After the family moved out and the property was abandoned, a, quote, mysterious fire occurred which burned the property to the ground. To get to the Hoffman Mansion, you cross the Little People Bridge, where the souls of the children are said to wander, demanding a candy sacrifice. The tale goes, if you set a piece of candy on your car, the road, or the bridge, the deceased children come for the candy. You might hear tapping on your car. You may feel the car rocking, and then later discover tiny handprints on your car. The energy there is dark, bridging on evil. It's vastly different than the energy at the Spook Light. Now that you have this background, I'll begin my tale of Hoffman's Mansion. About 14 years ago, my friends and I worked at the local TV station. We didn't get off work until 10:45 at night, but being in our late teens and early 20s, we often hung out after work despite the late hour. One night, someone suggested driving out to the Spook Light. Living in a small town, you really had to get creative with ways to spend your time. I offered up my SUV to take us on our little adventure. My best friend Dory was driving, her husband Scotty beside her. Our friends Sam and Ryan were in the back seat, and myself and our friend Daniel were in the very back of my SUV. We drove out to Spooklight Road, parked the car, turned it off, and waited for the spook light to appear. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And that was a doesn't appear night. Refusing to return home without a spooky experience, we decided to travel on to Hoffman's Mansion. I had not been to Hoffman's Mansion before. Dory and Scotty had, and relayed that it is a much different experience than the spook light. They and some friends had been there before ghost hunting and had had a troubling experience. Hoffman's Mansion was about a 10-minute drive, and being in the country, you had to take dirt and gravel roads to get there. Even though I'd never been out there before, I could tell when we were getting closer because of a dark feeling that was bubbling up in the pit of my stomach. My paranormal intuition is that of senses and feelings. I very rarely see a visible apparition, but I can usually tell when a spirit is near. Dory is a full-blown paranormal intuitive, often seeing and sometimes even speaking with spirits. Scotty believes kinda. He thinks he has some feelings and intuitions, while our other friends just thought the whole thing was plain silly. As we pulled up to what was left of Hoffman's mansion, I was sitting with my knees pulled to my chin, hugging my legs, trying to control the nausea building inside of me. The feeling I had wasn't just that a spirit was near, but that the spirit was bad, evil, and maybe even wanted to hurt us. We arrived, pulled up next to the remains of the house, turned off the car and the headlights, and then we sat silent in the dark, waiting. A few minutes passed. I dared to peek out the sliver of window I had in the back of my own SUV, but didn't see anything. And still, we waited. For what? Anything, I suppose. 3 things all happened all at once. The bubbling nausea grew to a boiling point within me, and I buried my face in my knees. I refused to look up because I had the thought of, if I look up, I'm going to see something I don't want to see. I felt there was a black mist in human form next to my car. Simultaneously, Scotty turned to Dory and simply said, "Drive." But Dory had already tried to turn the ignition over and nothing happened. The car would not start. Daniel, sitting beside me, kept saying, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I could feel his eyes on me, but I refused to lift my head. I felt something dark behind the car, even possibly holding the car in place, refusing to let it go. Is that why the car won't start? I wondered over and over. The elapsed time felt like 10 minutes, but was truly probably only 30 seconds. Again, Dory tried turning the ignition over until finally it roared to life. She peeled away, kicking up a cloud of dirt in our wake. Our non-believer friends were a little rattled, but mostly confused by what had just happened and all of our reactions to it. A few miles away from Hoffman's mansion, we stopped briefly to regain our composure. Ryan came to the back of the car to let Daniel and I out for a moment to stretch our legs. The handle for my trunk is in the very middle of my car, right above the license plate, like most SUVs. He opened it and we got out, never shutting the door to the trunk. Only when Daniel and I got back in did Ryan shut the door. Feeling that we had had an adequately spooky experience, we began to make our way back to the TV station where the rest of our cars were. We arrived in the brightly lit parking lot. Our friends got out of my car, and Daniel and I waited to be let out of the trunk. Everyone was standing at the back of the car, but no one was letting us out. Why? I could hear their muffled voices, and it sounded like they were confused and possibly arguing. Finally, the back door to my trunk opened, then Daniel and I climbed out. Someone shut the door, and I couldn't believe what I saw next. Under the bright lights of the parking lot, I could see that there were 20, 25, maybe more tiny little handprints scattered all over the back of my car in the dust that covered the vehicle. All over the back. Up high towards the roof, down low, on each sides, in the middle. Trying to debunk what we were seeing, someone suggested it was from when Ryan opened the trunk to let Daniel and I out previously. After putting Ryan's giant man hand next to the tiny prints, there was no way that was true. Mine and Dory's hands were the closest to being the same size, but even our adult hands were much bigger than the tiny handprints all over my car. And besides, neither her nor I had touched the back of my car that night. Was it the tortured souls of the children at Hoffman's mansion trying to get to us? Or the rumored souls at Little People Bridge? Maybe they were trying to warn us of the evil, dark presence I had felt, or just mad that we hadn't given them any candy. Whatever it was, this was my first and last visit to Hoffman's mansion. Shout out to my best friend Dory for introducing me to Scared to Death. Stay spoopy, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel.
What is it about teeny tiny hands that is so damn creepy?
I know, and so many of them on there.
Oh, God.
That's one of those things where it's like, I've talked in the past about like, okay, when you see maybe that classic like lady in a white dress, always seen at the top of the stairs in such and such mansion.
Sure.
And always kind of like moving the same way, maybe looking out. Maybe she fell down the stairs. That's how she died. Or she was left at the altar and then she hanged herself. Like there's some but it's the same movement, the same little loop.
Yeah.
But then with something like that, where it's like, well, that's not like a loop. It's not like there was a bunch of little kids putting hands on that's just what they did. These little kids, as soon as the car parked, they ran over in a group and they put their little hands all over the car. Like that wasn't happening.
Right.
Like when they were alive.
Yeah.
So like, what is that? And are those kids or is it some other kind of entity?
It makes me think of a story we had many moons ago.
Like that bus or something?
That's right. That's right, Dan. Yeah. And I think that it was in Denver.
Somewhere in Colorado, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was something about like you go ahead. Do you remember?
Yeah, you park in a tunnel.
That's right.
Or something. And then when you come out, sometimes you'll have like little handprints all over it.
That's right. Yeah. Good memory. I believe to add to that, I believe you pull the car, vehicle, bus, whatever it is, into the maybe that's what it is. Maybe you park and there is a bus in there already, like a bus, because
something like that.
Something about like I believe like children got trapped on a bus and died in this tunnel. So you can go in there in your vehicle, and then there might be handprints all over your vehicle. But I think you have to like pull into the tunnel either. The bus is still there or where the bus approximately is. Turn your vehicle off, turn the lights off, and then yeah. And I might even be smashing together two stories there because I think this is the third tiny hands on a vehicle story that I can recall from this show.
Yeah, it is very weird.
It does make sense to me though because okay, hear me out. Okay, if there were 20 handprints, that means there were 10 kids, and I mean, give or take, kids get frantic, they get scared. They also like to play games. So it's like, it makes sense to me that they think like, ooh, we can get candy. Maybe they just think they're playing a game. Like, okay, if we rock the car, if we shake it, they'll throw candy at us. Like almost like a parade, you know? Like I don't think that it's another entity and I cannot give you any valid reason why other than children tend to be playful. And my guess is that before they died, they probably were having a good time at their summer camp until these terrible things happened to them. And I don't know, kids, I think, forgive quickly. They are resilient more so oftentimes than adults. So I just think of these like little ghost children who like, yep, they went through something terrible, but they're like, whatever, we just want candy. Like, I think of it in a much lighter way. Yes, scary if you're in this vehicle and your car's shaking or you get out and you see it. That it does not, not make it spooky. It's just from the kid perspective, I think it's probably really funny for them. Maybe they're getting away with scaring adults and they think that's really funny. Yeah.
And what are they doing? Okay, so if these entities are just hanging out in this area, and sometimes when a car parks up there, they will scare the people by putting like the handprints on the car or something. I always just think also like, what are these entities doing when no one is around?
Hanging out.
Just hanging out.
Finding a teeter-totter, playing a game of t-ball. I don't know.
I would guess that time might work very differently. Okay, like there's this other side, and sometimes we see through the veil this other side. I wonder if time moves very, very differently over there.
Maybe there is no time. Like maybe time is just a construct, of just like, it's like they're, because think about how we utilize time. How many hours do you have to work this week? What time must you be somewhere?
Well, yeah, we measure time, but time is like it's hard for me to wrap my head around just there not being time.
Like in the way that like if they're just stuck.
Like if they're
it's not like, okay, it's bedtime, I have to get up and go to work tomorrow. Like
correct. There's no measurement of time but what are they doing where it's 12 hours for us and no one's up there?
I don't think it's like anything to them.
They're just up there hanging out, waiting for the next car to come, or are they not there? Are they not even like sentient? They just kind of like poof in and out of existence?
Maybe.
So many questions. Continually. There'll always be questions on this show forever. We could do 1 million episodes. And on the 1,000th episode, I'd be like, what is happening?
I do like this question about time. If they're not measuring time, they're not using time to track, the day of the week, how old they are.
But do they even feel it?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Well,
Yeah.
because I think that we feel time because we use it as a measurement and we track it and we utilize it for our lives.
And it's very real. I mean, like the sun is rising and setting and
but
we're getting older. And
are they just constantly in darkness?
Right.
Because we only, from our experiences, I don't want to say only, but mostly we only see them at night. But does that mean that that's how it is for them? Are they nocturnal? Like what?
Right.
The questions continue.
I know. It would be kind of funny, like if time does move the same way for them, if they're just so bored, or what a tortured existence. If the lady in the white dress at the top of the stairs, she's like, Jesus Christ, I've been coming to the top of the stairs for 350 fucking years. I'm so over this staircase. I want to do anything other than that.
I did see a funny meme this past week that it was it was a picture of an older house, maybe a staircase or something, and it said something like my roommates keep asking if this place is haunted, but I've lived here for 246 years and I've never noticed anything.
That's great. That's great.
Like, oh, that's clever. Very clever.
Nice work, meme maker.
Well done. Oh my God. Remember when Kyler was really into making memes?
For years. Oh, making memes. I thought you were going to say, I jumped again there. I think going to say showing us memes.
No, I think that maybe, knock on wood, we're done.
Yeah.
They're very few and far between now. At least now they're funny.
Yeah, true. For a long time, it was showing us just a nonsensical meme, and then that's going like, okay. And then him trying to defend why it was definitely funny and we should have laughed so much harder. There was like a couple years of that.
Well, because it was like out of nowhere, he would just shove a phone in your face.
Right. With all these expectations of like, huh? And I'm like, okay, sure, buddy.
He still does like to prompt a reaction. Some things never change.
You want to thank the Annabelles first this week or me?
I would love to start, Dan. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank the following Annabelles for your continued love and support on Patreon. It means the absolute world to us and helps us keep doing what we're doing. Kristen, Caitlin Alexander, Jake Dufresne, Corey Riley, Doc Wilkie,
nice,
Ty Young, Scott Smith. Hey, Scott, thanks for having a easy to say name.
Man, yeah, no one's messing Scott Smith's name up.
Oh my!
If someone is messing up Scott Smith's name, they're messing up every name. Unless they're a non-native speaker. Then maybe it's tricky for whatever they're coming from.
Okay, that's fair. Mylene, Laura, and Angel Tronco. I almost called you Angel Bronco, just so you know.
Angel Bronco. That's like a new cool Bronco variation. The Ford Bronco Angel.
Okay.
I'd like to thank the following Annabelles. Liz, like Alyssa, thank you for the letting us know.
Oh, she didn't. I let you know.
Oh, you did that. Okay.
I did that.
Well, thank you. Spooky Librarian Brandy, Myra Delcid, TSG_Juggernaut. Nice, a gamer. Coralie, a.k.a. the Perseverance Fairy. Oh, that's sweet.
Cute.
Pickles the Fluff. That's great. Christine J., Mickey Brown, Gage Myers, and Dave Crawford.
I had some delicious pickle fries.
You love a fried pickle.
I do. But these were pickle fries. So just pickles cut into the fry shape.
Yeah, like a zucchini fry, but with pickles.
Yes, it was.
I bet that would be really good.
It was really good. It was at the Sawmill Grill in Post Falls.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a dirty Bulgarian to drink. And you guys, listen, if you live locally, Dan and I went there once just on a whim. Oh yeah, I heard this place is good. And then I just went back with some girlfriends. Absolutely excellent. So good.
So good.
Great fish tacos, good salads. Really good cocktails. Ask to sit upstairs if you don't like children because it's 21 and over. God bless the hostess. I was with 4 women, all of us over 40. She goes, is everyone in your group 21?
Nice touch, hostess.
And we all started laughing and she's like, no, seriously. And I was like, oh, she takes her job seriously.
Oh, my.
It was really cute.
You want to do some spoopy shout outs?
I do. Thanks for asking. To Edgar from Poe, I know life can be overwhelming, but no matter what, I'll always be proud of you. Enjoy your special day and the spoopiest wishes for the coming year, you wonderful hillbilly weirdo. Big ghost hugs. Okay, that's very cute. To Casserole from Sweeney Todd. I miss working at the funeral home with you so much. You're such an incredible friend, mother, and overall person. You possess an incredible knack for adding humor, wisdom, and general cleverness to any situation with the right touch of smartassery. You make the world a better place. I'm so lucky to call you my friend and experience just a fraction of the love you pour out. I love you to pieces, and I can't wait to have beef stew with you soon. And lastly, to Josh and Alicia from Arissa, your third wheel for life. Happy engagement, you fuckery fucks. Congrats on this new chapter of your life. I've only waited 12 years for this moment. Insert eye roll.
I love inside jokes and little like pet names amongst friends.
Oh, it's so great.
It is so fun. And I love that it's such a common thing.
Yes.
If you're not doing it, give your friends some weird nicknames. It's very fun.
It's so great. I just did 2 nights with 2 of my best friends, Thin Lizzy and Malibu. And,
Nice.
and they call me the magical unicorn. And it's fantastic.
And I hope you thought our show was fantastic. That is our show for today. Thanks for continuing to send in your personal tales of terror to mystory@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. We love sharing your tales. You can email us for everything else at info@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. Thank you to Logan Keith for scoring today's show. Thanks to Heather Rylander for organizing the My Story emails, and to book editor Drew Atana, polishing and preparing listener stories for book number 6.
Possibly from his Jeep on the side of the road somewhere in the Carolinas, because that was the last update, that he was drinking cheap wine and eating SpaghettiOs while charging his phone in his car.
Oh, man.
I know we were going back and forth about it, of just like, I said, like, this isn't even like, because they don't have power and all these things. It's not even like fun. Like when I was a kid living in the Midwest, I would pray for like one of those monster snowstorms where you're snowed into your house with power and all your things.
Yeah.
This is not that.
This is not that, yeah. Thank you to Molly Box finding the first story I told this week, and to Olivia Lee, who's also been dealing with stuff in South Carolina, taking a little break from work because she has no power, unable to get to a place with power.
Yeah.
For finding the second. We are on Facebook and Instagram, where we post pics that accompany episodes and more at Scared to Death Podcast. Also have a private Facebook group, Creeps and Peepers, full of, I believe, over 25,000 fellow horror lovers right now.
And we pop in there sometimes too. So sometimes you'll catch us.
Big thanks to the All Seen Eyes, the Creeps and Peepers moderators, for just making our online community such a fun place for so many. And enjoy your nightmares, Creeps and Peepers. Hope you were scared to death.
Bye.
If spirits threaten me in this place, fight water by water and fire by fire. Banish their souls into nothingness and remove their powers until the last trace. Let these evil beings flee through time and space. Evil may pass through, but has no home here within, scared to death.
Mad Magic Productions.
We're not building twin mansions, you guys.
Lower your expectations.